Welcome to the PGN Podcast. With this podcast, we're looking to normalize the conversation around flooding. What happens behind the scenes, lifting the curtains on the mystery that can sometimes come into play when you're either involved with flooding or trying to protect your home. We're talking to some experts in the industry and relaying some of the experiences we heard from some communities. Hopefully, after our series, you have a bit more information to help yourself or help others in an emergency where flooding is involved. Right, we're back. I'm Meshi, Taka, and that's Hodgson. Today's episode, we'll be having a closer look at how flood risk management is regulated in England, and also the different people that all have responsibilities. As communities, sometimes we feel frustrated when we want to reach out or need support, and we contact our local council and we're told to contact the water company and vice versa. And the whole point of today is to explore the systems behind that process, and also hopefully to kind of create a bit more awareness. So the next time something happens, you know exactly where to go.
Yeah, so today, obviously, coming from a local authority background, when flooding incidents occur, we deal a lot with the Environment Agency and Northumbrian Water. So it's great to welcome back Richard Woodhouse, who's the Sustainable Sewerage Manager from Northumbrian Water, to join this discussion. So welcome, Richard. To kick off, the Flood and Water Management Act is something that shapes what we do as risk management authorities. So, how did that come about, and how did that change how you worked for Northumbrian Water?
Yeah, I think it's worth to understand that the Flood and Water Management Act was a direct consequence of the pit review. Pit review was a direct consequence of the flooding in summer 2007. So lots of the country was underwater in 2007. I think there was 55,000 properties flooded, about 7,000 people were rescued, and unfortunately 13 people lost their lives in those flooding events. You probably remember Tewkesbury Cathedral being an island with half the Tewkesbury being underwater, and Hyde water treatment works, so there was bottled water going out. I think it was the biggest loss of infrastructure since the Second World War. So Michael Pitt then produced a report in 2008, which he made 92 recommendations, and some of those recommendations made their way into the Flood and Water Management Act of 2010, including, we should work together in partnership, and so when you were saying, Meshi, about people not knowing who to contact and how we put things in place, the Pitt Review did express what should happen in those instances. Some of those recommendations for local authorities, water companies, Environment Agency, even down to, people should have a resilience kit for themselves and a flooding kit for themselves. I think that was one of the recommendations. Yeah. So Michael Pitt, I don't know how you put that into law and legislation, and it hasn't. But there was in there about having a torch and all your insurance documents and all that sort of stuff. So it was very wide-ranging. It was very thorough. And I think there was also thoughts on there having a single authority or single organisation in charge. But there was also some realisation that people are responsible for different things. The Environment Agency, if it's a named river, it's their responsibility. If it's a non-named river and it goes through your land and you as a riparian owner,
an ordinary water
course, you're responsible, and you have a responsibility under law to maintain that so it doesn't cause an issue to others and yourselves. Water and sewerage companies, they have obligations under the Water Industry Act, when a public sewer and what we should do for public sewers. That doesn't mean it never floods. I think we've discussed on a previous episode, it doesn't really say that things will never flood again. It's all about managing risk. And there's also landowners and lots of other. And if you're a property owner, you've got an obligation to maintain your property so it doesn't impact on others. So you shouldn't have a disrepair or do something deliberately to pass your water on to somebody else to cause them a problem. You could be liable for whatever costs they incur. There's also the common law negligence and nuisance, which can be used by other people to say, you did this, it was negligent, you caused me a nuisance, therefore I'm going to claim back. So there's lots of elements in there in existing legislation and in the Flood and Water Management Act.
Yeah, because obviously there's a Land Drainage Act as well that plays a big part, and some elements of that changed as part of the Flood and Water Management Act. And then, things like Highway Drainage and Town and Country Planning Act, there are drainage and flood risk considerations as part of that as well. So we need to there's a wide range of legislation, is probably the best way to put it. But ultimately, our industry is led by the Flood and Water Management Act.
Yes.
But I think one of the things that the Flood and Water Management Act does is recognises the different duty holders. So Richie, you want to take us through who these people are? They're referred to as the risk management authorities. Who are the risk management authorities?
So the risk management authorities can be varied, and lots of people can be risk management authorities. So the local authority is a risk management authority. If you're a unitary authority, you're normally the lead local flood authority. The Environment Agency, they're a risk management authority, but they have overall responsibility for trying to ensure that all risk management authorities carry out their duties. Water and sewerage companies can be risk management authorities, and there can be others, other utilities, other infrastructure, people who own railways and the like. They can be risk management authorities. It can be quite all-encompassing. It can't be an individual landowner or an individual property owner. That's not an authority. And you're not there to try to manage risk. And I think it's ensuring that we emphasise is the risk management. Again, it's not the total alleviation of flooding.
I mean, Carl, I want to pick on you because you're council, aren't you?
Yeah.
So even in the conversation around local authorities, you want to take us through the different elements within that?
Yeah, so obviously flooding, as we've covered in a previous podcast, there are many sources of flooding. So, flooding from main rivers and the sea, which Richie's already mentioned, is the Environment Agency. And then sewer flooding would be Northumbrian Water, as it were. And then surface water, ordinary water courses, and groundwater would be the local authority, or the lead local flood authority. So these are obviously all outlined in the Flood and Water Management Act. But as the lead local flood authority, under Section 19 of that Act, we have a duty to investigate flooding incidents. And that means, if a flooding incident occurs, and the Act is not very descriptive on what constitutes as a formal investigation. Normally, I think local authorities, if they get a phone call after an event, they'll go out and have a look and then engage with the relevant authorities. So, if we look at things like Thunder Thursday or, Babette or
Kieran.
Forgot. Still, yeah. So you can tell I was on leave for that one. So we would have a mop-up meeting, pardon the pun, with the tech support team from Northumbrian Water, so not Richie, but a different department. They talk what they've had coming in. We talk about what we've had coming in, and we'll try and work out who is the best person to respond and look at a potential long-term solution if it was, or engage with that resident. So that's the key role, but that is also a duty within the Flood and Water Management Act that we as lead local flood authorities have a duty to work with other risk management authorities. In that, we also have a duty to promote sustainable drainage as well. So that's looking at planning applications that are coming in and ensure that they are not posing a risk of flooding to either the people who are buying these new properties or new developments, or that new development is impacting other existing properties as well. So in summary, that's sort of where we are as lead local flood authorities. But within the local authority itself, we have responsibilities as a highway authority to manage surface water from the highway. we own land, we own open spaces as well, and there's that landowner element that other landowners would have, but also as a planning authority, and then a category 1 responder from the resilience perspective as well. So it's not just the Flood and Water Management Act and what the flood management teams within councils would do. We've also got to work with other internal departments, and more so now, with things like sustainable drainage, and when we're putting in flood schemes where we can claim money from the Environment Agency to better protect homes, we've now got to look at things like ecology, biodiversity, because it's not just about water quantity now, not about how much water we store or move from an at-risk place to somewhere else, but also we've got to make sure that water quality's got betterment, and we're creating biodiversity net gain as well. So we're working more with landscape architects, planners, ecologists, there's a whole suite of people, even transport planners to some respect as well. So yeah, it's becoming a very integral part of local authorities and how they're moving forward.
Coming back to the Flood and Water Management Act, it obviously created the role of what is now known as the LLFA.
Yes.
But what else did the Act do? What else did it kind of create in the space of flood management in England?
I think it was that formal responsibility to work collaboratively, and to look at it's not me, it's what can we do, and to a certain extent, some people are doing that anyway.
Yeah,
and it just formalised good and best practice within the industry. So it's not as if we never talk to anybody. You'll find, especially in the Northeast, it's a very small community, and there's only so many people, and you end up just talking to the same people all the time. Which is really good. Has a big positives relationships, but really it's formalised those relationships, and really it led in our region to the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership, and that was looking at how we expand what we do and how we work together, as Carl explained, to how we can come up with better solutions and manage risk better amongst ourselves.
So one example where, as a local authority, I was looking at doing a study in a certain area, Northumbrian Water looking at doing a study in the same area. So I'm looking at surface water flooding, Northumbrian Water looking at sewer flooding. If we work together, we can create a better, more robust, more affordable and more economically viable solution. So the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership is helping us deliver schemes that way, which nationally it's been referenced in is it the Jenkins review, wasn't it? Yeah. And that's really really good to see that the good hard work we've been putting in over the last 10 years since the formation of the partnerships, being rewarded, and myself and Andrew Doherty, who's the coordinator for the NIDP, we've been to do national presentations on the work and partnerships, etc. And I think we're at a point now with a partnership where it's not just looking at capital schemes, it's not just looking at solutions, but how we as risk management authorities can work better together in planning and policy and delivery. So when we're saying we're working with other risk management authorities, it's not just as a council, it's not just the water company, Northumbrian Water, and the Environment Agency, but it's neighbouring authorities as well, making sure we're consistent in knowledge and information sharing as well, which I think has a great value. Even collaborating to better train our members of staff. We have training days that we collaboratively fund through the NIDP, and that's not just for LLFA officers, but that's also for Northumbrian Water officers and potentially consultants and Environment Agency officers. So we're trying to use that to upskill, because there's a massive skills shortage in the area. That's going totally off topic to this particular episode, but it's something I think it's important to understand, that change in legislation to encourage us all to work together, that's the fruits of that. That's how we've perceived that as a region.
Yeah, and I think if you take your project Groundwater Northumbria, you take that as a natural extension, and how groundwater can impact on assets and how it can cause flooding or be part of the reason why flooding occurs. I don't think that may not have taken off without the relationships
Yeah.
that have been built up over time. And, it's to start thinking, and I knew nothing of the underground mine working systems and where it would pop out if things failed. Certainly know that now, and it's not something that's always been nothing that's been forefront of our minds, but it is a contributor. And I think that the Flood and Water Management Act helped us work together. And again, I think that NIDP and your project Groundwater Northumbria is a consequence of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think the studies we've done in the past through the NIDP haven't considered groundwater, but Chopple's coming forward in the Gateshead area, and that's somewhere where there's known groundwater issues. So bring this to the table, and we'll see how different that report is and how that approach has changed. But again, that's the first project coming forward where groundwater is going to be a part of it. So even though it's a well-formed partnership, it's still evolving, it's still changing, and we're still reviewing how everything goes forward.
Yeah, and we're lucky. Well, in a certain extent, there's an emphasis now on storm overflows and discharge of overflows to the environment. That will cost a lot of money. But that will open up opportunities to not just link flooding together under the Flood and Water Management Act. Is really taking that next step further and say, well, we've got another issue where we need to resolve something. How can we bring flooding into that?
Yeah.
How can we, if we've got to reduce a discharge from an overflow, and we're going to do that by nature-based solutions, can that nature-based solutions be adapted and used in a different way for when flooding comes to store that flood water, and that just brings it the next level.
Yeah, and again, the more surface water we stop getting into those combined systems, the less CSO spills we have. In essence, and if the LLFA have got responsibility for surface water and there's funding available to reduce the risk of that, and Northumbrian Water are trying to reduce the amount of their CSOs, it's critical we work together. But the CSO spills and but this is all came to light from the Environment Act in 2020, wasn't it? Yeah. And again, that's changed how, as LLFAs, or well, certainly as a water company, everyone acts again slightly, and that's going to have an implication in addition to Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act for new developers. So it's a constantly evolving.
Yes.
Probably by the time this podcast comes out, there'll be another announcement.
I think as long as we continue to revisit and to respond to the environmental challenges, which is what this is, there's always that value to kind of always checking back to see where you are in the wider picture, really. Water and sewage companies, I mean, we've talked about the risk management authorities, and then we've touched on the NIDP, the kind of partnership which has allowed for collaboration between these management authorities. I just want to explore the systems behind this, the different authorities. So you've described the fact that the Environment Agency has kind of a overarching responsibility to oversee, should we say, flood management in England. The water companies have a slightly different position in that stream, don't they? In how they operate.
Yeah, and it's worth understanding water and sewage companies.
Water and sewage companies are
something different, but water and sewage companies, obviously, we provide water and clean and wholesome water, which tastes good. I'll have to get that in. And then you've also got the opposite side, the dirty water side. I think it's a dirty water side people don't think of that often. If you turn your tap on, it comes out, you see the consequence of turning the tap on. If you flush your toilet, you don't see the consequence of that flushing the toilet.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yes. And I think there's aspects of how water and sewage companies work. One, it shall never mix. Your clean and your dirty should never mix. So we are split into not two companies, but there's definitely a water side and a wastewater side. And from that wastewater side, we've developed drainage and wastewater management plans for the first time, which were published this year. The whole of England, all the water and sewage companies in England did that. That outlines what we're going to do for the next 25 years. and beyond. We've got a long-term delivery strategy which covers water and wastewater, and what our plans are for flooding and for other environmental aspects. But we are funded predominantly for statutory obligations, and we are funded by our regulator, Ofwat, economic regulator, on a 5-year cycles. Our draft business plan for the period 2025 to 2030 went in on the 2nd of October, and a lot of work from people in Northumbrian Water to get that there. There's lots of queries coming back, lots of toing and throwing between now and I think it's June when we get our draft determination. That then allows us to invest. It tells us how much money we can invest and how much we can raise bills by, or how much we can charge customers. So remember, this is all money that comes from people in the end. Water and sewage companies invest a lot. It's in billions of pounds. I think the next 5-year period between 2025 and 2030 will be our biggest investment ever. It's probably in excess of £2.5-3 billion around those numbers, and that then means that bills increase over time. We borrow money as a water and sewage company, and we make a return on that investment as well.
So the review you're talking about, was that the PR24?
That's
period?
Periodic review
24, yeah.
Because we tend to go between them. I used to get confused, is it periodic review or price review?
Yeah.
And
then just to get me any other acronyms out of the way here, AMP is Asset Management Programme.
Yeah.
So
that's your key NW, Northumbrian Water acronyms.
It should be NWG though, Northumbrian Water Group. But it's a fair point you calling me out, because not every water company is a sewage company. So you have water only companies in England, and you have water and sewage companies.
Yeah.
So in the Northeast we have NWG Group, which is NWL for the Northeast, but we also have, for example, Hartlepool Water, which is just a water company.
Yeah.
So that is a fair clarification.
Yes.
Sometimes you get used to just shortening it to just a water company,
Yeah.
but there is a slight distinction between the two. So you've talked us through the funding process. I think that's kind of where sometimes the getting different authorities to align can be challenging. And I'm going to come to Carl, because again, that's somebody who how the kind of funding process from an LLFA point of view can look like.
So the lead local flood authorities, we have access to funding from DEFRA, so the Department of Environment, Farm and Rural Affairs.
Food and
Rural Affairs. Sorry, I always through the environment, which is administrated through the Environment Agency. So that's called Flood Defence Grant and Aid, which is FDGIA, and that's based on a 6-year cycle, a 6-term medium-term plan, MTP cycle. So I'm getting all my acronyms out here as well. So obviously working here, you've got to understand the Northumbrian Water speak and the Environment Agency speak. So I like to term ourselves as in LLFAs as bi-acronymical, because you need to know both. So there we are. There's my little bi-acronymical joke. So basically, that flood defence grant and aid, that's to better protect homes. So the Environment Agency have got targets to better protect homes at risk from all sources of flooding. So as local authorities, we review the risk of flooding in our local area, predominantly from surface water, and then with the Environment Agency, rivers and the sea. So for example, if there was flooding from the River Tyne, that's something that would be led by the Environment Agency. Another example of those schemes are Morbeth up in Northumberland, and then Team Valley and Gateshead as well, which are flood defence schemes, but led by the Environment Agency, funded through flood defence grant and aid. So what local authorities look at is the surface water floodings. To do that, we've got to look at the damages that are incurred by those. So we've got to do something called an economic appraisal, and we look at the consequences of doing nothing. So doing nothing is walking away from that and just no maintenance on anything, and just allowing that water to behave. Obviously, Northumbrian Water as a private company, they've got their own statutory duties, which we need to consider as part of that. And I think that particular element of this process is why, one of the main reasons we really need to work with Northumbrian Water, because that surface water ultimately goes into a surface water sewer system, and
a combined system,
or a combined system, yeah. And that can have a potential of 2 miles up the road. If it goes in, it can potentially come out and flood somewhere else, and we've got to make sure that whatever we do anywhere doesn't have a detrimental impact downstream. How we do that is we look at those economic damages, and then we cost up a solution to reduce the risk. So you'd have do something options, and you'd put them against the do nothing options. So there'd be a capital cost. So so it would cost £500,000 to build, and then you'd look at the lifetime of that project. So it might have a 50-year lifespan, and you say, right, well, the amount of times that would flood in those 50 years, the damages might be 2.2 million. So you'd get a return of £4 for every pound spent. If it was a £500,000 scheme, just over. So that's how that's calculated, and then we would look at that best do something option, and that might work economically. That might be brilliant, but it might not be what social, technically, or environmentally people want, or best for that place and best for that location, and that's something you have to weigh up as part of this process as well. But in addition to that, what we tend to have to do in these particular areas, we're on the second MTP now, so we've been doing these schemes since 2013, and the cut and dry surface water schemes, they were done on the first MTP. The ones we're doing now, we've got to look at how it's, we've got to start looking at other public or private contributions to make these stack up. So that might be working with schools, and we do a lot with the Department for Education through Suds for Schools. So I've been working on a scheme over the last year in Kent and Bar, which is using that. And then we've got other things like working with the Highway Authority to better improve highway drainage and manage highways, but also people like landowners and charities, etc. as well. And it's not necessarily a financial contribution, but it could also be a benefit in kind, or a non-tangible contribution. So potentially using open space from parks as an attenuation area. That's happened on one of my past schemes as well. So it's, while we can get that flood defence grant and aid from the Environment Agency, we've got to now find other ways to work up that difference. And again, working with Northumbrian Water, they have benefit in how that goes on in the future.
What you're describing there is a process that needs time.
Years.
And yeah, it can take years. And I think that's a kind of recurring frustration from communities. And they're like, well, I flooded last year and you haven't done anything about it. And it's the understanding that you don't just go from you flooded to a solution. There's a whole process. So when, for example, if I flood today is the first time, you don't just assume it's a flooding issue. You have to essentially ensure that it's not something else. Ensure that it's not a blockage, ensure that it's not a structural defect. Check that the sewer is working as it should before.
And that should be something found, if we take back to the day of the flood, that's something that should be found when doing the Section 19 report or doing that informal investigation after. And again, it might not be a published report, it might just be informal correspondence between ourselves and Northumbrian Water and the resident. But what we've got to do is give them assurance that we've looked into all the possible causes. And if the highway gullies have been blocked, or if there's been a blockage within the Northumbrian Water network or something like that, and that's been removed, that should give assurance. But if there wasn't, what can be done to potentially better protect in the future?
Yeah,
and again, it's better protect, it's not prevent.
And I think sometimes you have compound issues where there might be a blockage, but there's also a kind of system or incapacity issue, or just the fact that the whole system is overwhelmed. When you describe the process, so there's two different funding streams. You have a plan in place which identifies your prioritization, and you have a 6-year kind of cycle for your prioritization. And you almost need both of them to align and then match them up and then coordinate. And that's on the back of the additional research. And then you have to figure out what the best solution is. And then you start talking about, okay, let's do something about it. And then you have to find the skills to do the work. So whether it's to design it, to build it.
Yeah, that can be a bottleneck as well, because obviously when we submit, our funding bid or business cases, as it's called, to the Environment Agency for that money, would do a study to understand the problem and potential solutions. We need to make sure that that's done by a suitable professional.
Competent.
Yes. And there are only so many of those in the region. There are only so many nationally, to be fair. And, there are a lot more flood risk schemes that need to be done than people who can do them at the minute. And there is a lot, you look at the medium-term plan nationally, there's a lot of investment. You look at the DWMP plans that water companies do. There is a lot of betterment. There is a lot of investment in our industry. Mm-hmm. But whether we all at the minute have the human resource to deliver that is going to be a challenge. And we really need to look at STEM and getting more people involved into our industry and passionate about our industry, because it's not just civil engineering anymore. As you've talked about, nature-based solutions, as part of a drainage and wastewater management plan. I've mentioned we deal more with ecologists and more that biodiversity. We've got to make sure that climate change is an indoor to our industry, and having dealt with schools, etc., where kids are really passionate about climate change and really want to make a difference to our planet, more than kind of I can remember everyone else doing when I was at school. Mm-hmm. We need to start getting these people working in the industry, because they don't see civil engineering as a way to make the world a better place, like naturally,
But I think that's the point, though, that civil engineering of old and civil engineering of new are in two different spaces.
Yes.
And the focus is designing for a climate change future. And with that means you need a diversity of skills. I mean, obviously, we've got Rhiannon, who's a hydrogeologist,
yes,
on this project. And yeah, I think part of this conversation is the enhanced awareness and the understanding, but also hopefully there might be a few people going, oh, I wanna have a go at being part of the solution and being part of the change, which is ultimately what we want, really.
And flood management, schemes we're putting in through this flood defence grant and aid process, a lot of them are in the public domain, and Northumbrian Water have got so it's as much about placemaking as it is about engineering. You've got to give social or amenity value to these projects. I mean, one example I always cite is the Water Square in Rotterdam, where it's basically a five-a-side court that's stepped down, and in heavy rainfall that takes the surface water from the tower blocks around it, and it fills with water to prevent flooding. So 999 days out of 1,000, or 99 days out of 100, depending on the return period. That's a usable football pitch. But then on that rainy day, it fills full of water and stops people flooding.
Yeah, and I think that we have instances of that in the region that just maybe didn't happen by design. It just happened.
Yes.
So, if we take Brunton Park, for instance, it's on the Useburn. We carry out some works there, but on the really severe events, the City of Newcastle golf course floods rather than the properties.
Yeah,
and that's how it should be. And people accept that. Oh yes, well, it's really rained heavy, and so I don't play golf, but those people are still in their houses.
Yeah,
that's how it should be.
And as well, I think that again part of that economic appraisal process is right. So what's if we stop the water going to those properties into that agricultural land, what is the damage?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be a damage, there will be a cost to putting the water there, but is that cost significantly less than putting it there? And again, that might not be socially or environmentally the right thing to do, but it's an option you have to look at.
But I guess the point we're making here is that we should be looking at changing the narrative about what the socially acceptable thing to do is.
Yeah.
And also learning from others. And yes, because a lot of time you go, well, we're not the Netherlands, because we're not on the, you know what I mean? But it's not about what we're not, it's what we can learn from them. And you've talked about Rotterdam there. What are the transferable skills, transferable opportunities that we can adapt?
Yeah. And the thing about that example in Rotterdam is obviously we are aware that the Netherlands is a very low-lying area. Mm-hmm. That's got its own challenges with relation to tidal and river levels, etc. But that's a surface water example, and that's kind of like that's not necessarily their primary concern for flooding, but they're still adapting and they're still putting solutions forward for it.
And it doesn't have to be copy and paste though.
No, but I think, there are opportunities available to us, and landowners get a stewardship, if you're a farmer, rather than a subsidy to produce something. It's a land stewardship allowance, and maybe that can be there to, you hold back water, and to reduce the risk of river flooding or whatever. Yeah. And that's an opportunity. I don't think we've fully explored all the opportunities available. We could have done that previously. It's just something happened which forced us to think differently. Maybe we should have thought differently.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Leeds City Council are doing a similar scheme to exactly what you've cited there, where the River Aire, they're building basically a dam upstream. It's similar to Morpeth as well, yes. Where that restricts the flow, and then the agricultural land upstream of that is then filled. It almost becomes a reservoir to hold that water back. And again, Storm Babette, that was an example of where the Morpeth scheme worked well. And that's a great story. And again, it's land that is sacrificial upstream, but protects all those properties.
It is, absolutely. These are all amazing projects which have had impactful change on our communities.
Yeah.
But the point is, they didn't happen overnight.
No.
And for them to happen, it was the
But do you not
support
think that's
and
the right thing, though?
It is the right.
Because we're talking about the management of risk, and let's get back to this, the Flood and Water Management Act. It's management, right? And how do you manage water, and where it falls and where it goes to? And I think that we need to make sure that we, one, understand the problem before we start spending money and not solving an issue. There's nothing worse than doing something as a knee-jerk reaction and maybe making it worse, or maybe passing it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then you've got to say, right, does this stack up, as Carl says, and does it stack up against other priorities that other places have? Yeah. And we can't just physically go in and say, it flooded last week, let's do something this week. We're going to have to make sure it's right and it stacks up on the priorities. And that's something that people don't want to hear, but there's priorities in everything that we do. We prioritize investment in highways. We prioritize where people get hospital treatment, where they don't. And somewhere along the line, it's the highest priority is this. Therefore, that's where we invest. And just doing a knee-jerk reaction, you'll do it next year, doesn't allow that to happen.
Taking the time to do it right is ultimately the right thing to do. The question is around how we manage that process. Because the other side to it is these people who are flooding, there is a mental health capacity, there is a kind of strain of living with flooding. Yeah. So do we expand the narrative so you're looking at short, medium and long-term goals? The long-term goals is that big project. And I've touched on it with what we did with the property level resilience, where we went in and were able to give the communities peace of mind by essentially turning around fairly short-term delivery period, which then allowed the capital projects to do what they needed to do. And that applied in Brunton Park, and applied with Felgate. And what was really successful about the projects at that time is that was something that was consistent when the projects did get turned around. The feedback from the communities where we really appreciate the fact that we weren't actually looking out our windows every 2 minutes because we knew we had these doors and air bricks, but also we could actually commit to the investment and the process of the design. And actually what we found was they were a lot more helpful as communities, giving you the information needed to deliver those projects.
Yeah, and I think, working on property flood resilience PFRs, as you've mentioned in the previous podcast, that is something that I think as an industry we see that as an interim measure towards a long-term solution. It's just it's kind of, as you said, short, medium and long-term solutions. We need interim measures is probably the best way to put it. And another thing that's probably worth raising when we're on on this point is the comms engagement officers at the Environment Agency, and again, comms and engagement and raising awareness of flood risk. That's they've been brought in and they're only in our region, and to proactively go out and talk to flood, at-risk communities, getting flood wardens in place, helping people make flood plans. So if there is a risk of flooding happening again, people are prepared and know what to do in it. And we need to make sure that people are prepared and know what to do in that situation, because otherwise people just panic and ring anyone and everyone and they don't really know what to do. Yeah,
you have that information there that you can respond better. And we do have we have alert systems, particularly Environment Agency. There are support systems in place. And I guess part of the role of the comms is to get people to be aware that these systems are there. So then if the unthinkable happens and you are stuck or in a kind of tight spot, you then know who to call, how to report it, and so on and so forth. So
that goes back to Michael Pitt's one of the recommendations. You'll have a flood kit, you'll have your insurance premiums, you'll have your details, you'll have telephone numbers, who to contact, you'll have all your personal belongings safe. So those things that can't be replaced quickly, you don't have to. So really what we've talked about and gone full circle is, one of those recommendations that never really came into law for what people can do. Other people, it's starting to happen. And if the flood wardens and members of society can go out and say these things, and that helps people to prepare.
Yeah. And as well, getting back to the type of flooding as well, for example, York, where you've got river flooding there, they know it happens, but they know when it's going to happen, because upstream, the water's fell in Wensleydale, Swaledale, wherever, and it comes down, and they know they've got 18 hours or what have you. Where surface water, properties at risk of surface water, you know there's rain coming, but you never know how much rain's going to come. And there's very little or sometimes no time to prepare. And, they're the damaging storms, they're the damaging events, and they're the ones that play on people's mind.
They hit quick as well.
Yeah.
They hit really quick.
The water goes as quick as it comes. And, half an hour later, you kind of, people are flooded internally. The water's even out of the house by that time. And you kind of, 45 minutes ago, I was watching the football, and it's just kind of, it's surreal what happens. But obviously that mental health impact is devastating. And that's something, obviously, I think we've got a future podcast on as well. So I think that's something we'll save for another time.
Richie, if there was one thing, a disruptive idea that could completely transform flood management in England right now and for climate change future, what do you think that would be?
I would say that one radical idea, that the wholesale removal of impermeable area to put porous areas in. And even if that means that you start small and, you stop people privately from doing things, but every new development should have porous paving. Every reinstatement, every new highway should be porous. And they've done it in central London, in Hammersmith. They've dug up streets and put porous paving in for flood risk, and that's all it's for. And they used to put plastic cells underneath. Now they don't. They just put gravels and let that hold the water. If they can do it in central London, in Hammersmith, which is nigh on 100% impermeable, why can't we do it here? Yeah. And obviously Scotland, with the new development, etc., all driveways are permeable. It's being done elsewhere. And it's something that would be great to be doing. I totally agree with that. So,
stop avoiding the issue and just do it.
Yeah.
Well, and if we've said, if somebody's going to do something, if you're going to replace a door, replace it with a flood door. If you're going to resurface a road or reconstruct a road or build a new road, then do it. And if and all these new developments have new roads and highways, then do it.
And as well, I think this is where, as civil engineering or even as local government, we need to stop thinking in silos. Where we are the flood management team, we want to do this scheme. We are the transport team, we want to do this team. We're urban design, we want to do that team. The more we work together, the more we're trained in what each other does, the more we can integrate each other's solutions into our schemes. You know, and that's great for placemaking, but also as well, you know, if a transport scheme has got SUDs in that reduces flood risk, we can probably get a bit of flood defence grant and aid for that, you know, to supplement that funding as well. So it works from a funding perspective, and it works from a social perspective as well, where you're improving that social space. You know, I mean, any you know, imagine when we've got these low traffic neighbourhoods, for example, that have been going in nationally, and you think, well, actually, if they're putting bollards in to block off a street to stop rat running or what have you. Imagine if we put SUDS planters there that became a pocket park. You know, that would absorb water, it would give people a social space, and it would improve the traffic movements in the area.
Improve the curb appeal as well.
And well, it would make it holistically a nicer area. Yeah.
You know, you buy a property next to a water course, and it costs more. You know, they are appealing places to live. SUDS basins were something which used to be just stuck at the last extent of the development. Now they form developments around it. It's a natural habitat.
I think there's a really good example of that in Nunthorpe down in Teesside called Grace Towers, where, you know, it's the prestigious homes, and they all face out onto this SUDS pond. Derwentthorpe in York, that's another example where you know, that's the focal point of that development. So, you know, we can integrate flood management into better design of new build developments. We just need to work out how to do it better respectively. I mean, at our Kenton Bar scheme, Kenton Bar Primary School, we've got a basin there to store water. We've stepped one of the sides to make it a forest school. So, you know, that's being completed at the minute. So hopefully we can share some nice pictures of that and what have you. But yeah, I think, you know, you've just got to, everything costs so much now, you've got to spend your pound twice or on two things.
And I think that we really found the benefits of what we've done previously during lockdown. People understood that, you know, I can only go 5 minutes away from my house or whatever. I live 2 doors away from Horton Burn in Cramlington. It's never been as busy, because that's where everybody went, and it was like, I'm going to have to go somewhere else because I can't keep social distancing here.
Yeah.
But it was an amenity that people used and have continued to use, and we found that the schemes we're putting together, especially when worked in partnership and a sustainable drainage, have that amenity factor.
Yeah.
And have that mental health benefits which no one can measure. But if you can walk around in a nice habitat, and it makes you feel better, then that's got to be worth something.
Absolutely. And if you can have that on your doorstep now, instead of having to get in a car, there's carbon benefit in that and sustainability benefits in that. And, you know, going slightly off topic here, but there's 15-minute communities where you've got, you know, where you work, where you shop, where you socialise, where you exercise, all within 15 minutes of where you live. And, you know, I mean, I've changed where I live so I can walk my child to school, but there's a butcher's and a fruiter's down there that, you know, we can get our food and things, and kind of we use our car a lot less. And I think agile working's played a big part in that. Again, not necessarily related to flood risk, but you just think of how wider society is helping us be more sustainable. We need to work more with that.
Yeah, it's about how we live as a community, as a society as well, and just making sure that flood management is in step with that as well. Yeah. How can we use, or how can we explore what we're doing here to better our environments, to better biodiversity and habitats, as well as provide some kind of resilience towards flooding. So more multifunctional, like you said. The pound has to go much further these days.
It does.
And consistency is another thing, that just being consistent, because really good examples there, but they're still few and far between.
Yeah, they're examples we all repeatedly use, unfortunately, because there are many more. Well,
thank you very much, Richard. He has survived part 2. Well done.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard.
But it's been brilliant talking to you, and we're very grateful you make the time. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to the PGN Podcast today. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable. If you did, please like and subscribe to the podcast. But also, please, if you find this useful to anyone else, pass it on and spread the word.
To find out more about Project Groundwater Northumbria, please visit www.pgn.org.uk.